comrades, what's up? Hope everyone's doing well. If you can't tell by the tone of my voice, I'm a little sick, so we'll see what we can do here. I got like the cold or COVID or something, I don't know, some bullshit. Anyway, the next book in the series of books and anime that I'm watching / reading stuff is going to be kind of like a little tangent-y book. Sometimes I do this. I kind of just grab random stuff. So I finished Slayers. I just wanted kind of like a nice lighthearted thing after reading like the first four Dune books. But then I was like kind of scoping around like what other stuff I just had lying around on my drive, and I saw that I had a whole series of Michael Creighton books. If you don't know who Michael Creighton is, he's the guy who invented Jurassic Park, Sphere, the Congo. A bunch of movies were put out in like the 90s and early 2000s with like his stuff. He was like very prolific in writing kind of thrillers and mysteries and stuff. But definitely like Jurassic Park is his longest lasting legacy. He has much better books. So Jurassic Park's okay. I read a lot of his stuff when it was coming out like in the 80s and 90s. Like I remember I was in, I want to say 6th or 7th grade when Jurassic Park actually came out. And so I got it because one of my teachers was reading it. And then it was funny because the version of Jurassic Park that I got had like the swear words crossed off. Why? Anyway. Oh, Lord. Still remember that. That was hilarious. But this dude is like, he was, like I said, he's super prolific. And like every now and then I like find out that he wrote a book or that like he had like a full manuscript done of like a book that never got published. And so somebody just went in there and like edited it up and like published it. Like he has like a pirate book that came out in like 2007 or something. And like after he's dead, he's been dead for like, I don't know, 20 years or something. It's been a minute, maybe not that long. But when I was looking through this thing, seeing if there's any other books that he's put out that I haven't read yet, I found this one called The Case of Need. And he actually wrote it under a pseudonym. I don't think I have the pseudonym here. But it's this version of the audiobook that I got is like from cassette tapes. And I was like, damn, I haven't listened to an audiobook of cassette tapes since I was like in high school. Like, Lord. It's been a minute. That's cool. And so this is the story we're going to go over. It's called The Case of Need. It's the 4th book that he ever wrote. And I think it's the only one he ever wrote under a pseudonym from what I was looking at. Because I looked it up. I was like, is this really him? And I was like, oh, damn, yeah. I think the first one he wrote was like the Indominus strain, or is that a Stephen King book? I don't know. I was reading a lot of Stephen King and Michael Creighton at the same time. This is like back when they were both like writing books like every 6 months. But this one, I'm just going to give you like a primer to see if you want to keep listening. It's about a doctor. Well, it takes place in like the 1960s, and it's about a doctor who is investigating because his friend, like his close friend, is going to go to jail for like 20 years because supposedly he did an abortion on a woman who then died, right? In the 1960s, abortions in America were like verboten completely. So like if you did it, you'd get at least 5 years. And if it caused like a death, it would be like 20 plus years. And then this whole book takes place in Boston, which I love Boston. I spent a decent amount of time there in college and other sort of things. My wife and I, we met up there as well. So I have a lot of fond memories. This is like referencing all the places and stuff. Like, I know where that's at. That's fun. Or like, I worked there. That's cool. So I thoroughly am enjoying it. So here we go. So and then the story, instead of having like part 1, part 2, it breaks it up into like days. So it's like Monday, and then there'll be like chapter 1 through 16 is Monday, and then it'll be like Tuesday, and then chapter 1 through 16 on Tuesday. All right. So the story starts on Monday. We get introduced to like Dr. Barry. He's talking to like Conway. Conway's another doctor. Everyone here is like a fucking doctor. Dr. Barry is I don't know what their official term is off the top of my head. I know they've said it in this, but it's kind of like one of those things where it's like I'm listening to an audiobook while like doing other things sometimes. And so it's like I can't exactly recall it. I'm not gonna do like a half-hearted effort to look it up because that's not the kind of thing I do. We're just gonna keep going. But he's like a coroner, right? He does like the dead body autopsies to see what's going on. And he partially did it because he's just kind of like a lazy bro. And he's just like, I like being a doctor, but like I spent some time in law school and I was like in the Marines and like Vietnam and all this shit. Or was it Korea? No, he was in like World War II. Yeah, I think he was. We'll see if it's in my notes. But he was like in World War II as a medic. Then he came back and then he tried law and he did law school for like a year or two. And he's like, I don't want to be a lawyer. And then he went to med school. And he's got a wife and a couple kids. Anyway, so this Conway guy's like a surgeon or something, and he's pissed off because he lost a patient. He's like yelling at people and causing a big thing. And Barry's just talking about being a doctor and like all this other stuff and getting calls and calling others. And then all of a sudden his wife calls and he's like, hey, your friend Art's in jail. And he's like, Nani desu ka? And it's like, so Art is like it's Art Lee, right? And Art Lee is Chinese, like a Chinese American. And so that plays a role in this because again, this is written, I think this book was written in the 60s. I guess old as shit. But it takes place in the 60s, and it's like people don't mess around. Like we get like hard R's and stuff in this book. It's great. Right, a lot of racism, but like good old fashioned racism from like that era. And it's interesting to read because it's like reading Tom Sawyer, and like the way people talk to like other like black people or white people is like, well, yeah, I mean, what's his fuck who wrote Tom Sawyer? He was like living in that era, so he's just like writing normal talk. It'd be like me reading like just writing a story about like, oh yeah, in the 2025, I went down the street and some guy was like, hey buddy, or hey folks, and I'm like, God, I hate when people say folks. They're a bunch of retards who say that because they just say people or say guys or say y'all or something, right? Depending where you're at. But it's like, it really dates the whole thing. It makes you be like, God damn, these people talk like real stupid assholes. Anyway, so you get a lot of that. You get a lot of like old timey references and stuff, but it's like of the era when this was written. So it's great because it's like, damn, people really talk like that. That's fantastic. And Michael Creighton's a very good writer. So it's like, just reading his stuff is like very smooth, or listening to it. It's like everything just kind of flows. And this book tries to do a whole lot of medical jargon. And I read somewhere where it's like he has all these footnotes, and like the guy who's reading the audiobook says like, oh, footnote on this, and says it. And apparently Michael Creighton just like made shit up. Like he had some idea. I think he was like a professor somewhere, like at Harvard or something. So he had like a vague understanding of like medical terms. But apparently some of these footnotes are just total bullshit. I don't really talk about footnotes. Again, in this story, there's a lot of kind of just like, I'm just going to talk about like the general story, and I'm going to try to hit the important parts that we need to learn as we go through like this mystery about what's going on. So anyway, so him and Art have been friends since med school, and Art like secretly does abortions. And then him and Simmons, who they all work in like, I'm trying to remember which hospital it is in Boston. I think it's the Boston hospital. Like there's the Boston Men's, but they work in the same hospital anyway. So they've been kind of like covering up for him. So, not when like patients die or whatever, but then sometimes there's like tissue samples. Like coroners do more than just like dissect dead bodies. They also get orders to do like tissue sample studies and stuff like that. And they get like stuff coming down. At least they did in the 60s apparently. If this guy knows what he's talking about, they do in this book at least. So then Barry starts thinking about prior experience, and he starts like looking through, trying to figure out like patients that Art might have had and whatnot. And then he meets up later with Art at the prison. Is that what happens right now? Oh, no, he doesn't yet. He's just looking through like his charts and stuff, trying to find like if this guy did abortions or like if he met with anybody that might have been pregnant or anything like that. And then he's like, I need to go meet up with this guy a little bit later. And it seems like, trying to say the patient was pregnant. They discuss abortions. They disagree with their equal legality. Barry and the other guy help Art do. Oh, he's just like, he's remembering the past about, okay, so he's talking about how like Art, he was seeing these women who wanted abortions, or he kept having to do surgery on women who went and like aborted themselves or like got like the street abortions, and that wasn't working out. And they got to like a big fight, him and Art, about like doing it or not. And Art's like, well, I'm going to do it and just call it something else. And finally, like Barry and the other guy were helping him out, like I was saying before. So, and they would fake the charts. Okay. So then that's chapter 1. So then chapter 2 picks up, and this is, World War II. So we learned that Barry was a medic during World War II, then the law school. He quit that, and then he went to medical school. So at this point, he's heading to the police station to see if he can talk to Art. And so Barry's a real like smooth talker. So he gets in there, and he's like, hey, I'm here to see Art Lee. And the police officer's like, what are you, his lawyer or something? And then the guy's like, something. And the guy's like, all right, well, if you're here for like a legal reason, then I guess you can go talk to him. It's like, okay. And we find out that it's Karen Randall. And Karen Randall's important because her dad is like in charge of the men's hospital in Boston, which is one of the 3 big hospitals. And so he's a big like medical guy, and like they're in the medical fields. Like everybody knows who he is, and he's like got a big presence and he's like a head surgeon and all this stuff. But she's the one who died. And that Lee's being accused of doing an abortion on her and then causing her death. And Lee's like, I didn't do an abortion on her. She came in, and I didn't take any notes because he's an idiot. And as a medical professional, you got to document everything. You document. That covers your bases. So essentially, he has no proof that she came in or that he did anything or anything else. So then when he got accused by the patient's, like the young woman's mother-in-law, not mother-in-law, stepmother, we find out later, but people refer to her as her mother, that she went and had an abortion from Lee, and then she like there were complications and she died, right? So that's why he's here. But he's like, no, she came in and she was like 4 months along in the pregnancy. He's like, I didn't do abortions for 4 months. That's insane. It is insane. Doing an abortion on somebody after 4 months is fucking retarded for anybody who's listening, right? Like 6 weeks max. And at that point, after that point, only if there's like, the baby or the mom's gonna like fucking die from this shit, man. Like you gotta get those abortions like in early. Otherwise it causes so many complications, so many problems. And it's like no longer like an acceptable thing to do. If you're anywhere outside of like crazy places in the US, everyone agrees, 100%. Anyway. And so then Barry confers with him to talk about like what the lawyer is going to say. And he's like, I don't know. And something about him drinking. And he's like, I don't drink. And then they talk about how Karen comes from the medical family. And then as Barry's like wrapping up and he starts hanging out, the captain of the police station over here is like, I need to talk to you. So this is Captain Peterson. We just get some physical description. He's like a battle injury from something. They get to a big argument about Barry being a lawyer or not. And Barry's like very like, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Listen to your damn business. They talk about Karen and then like any info that he has. And this is where we learn that Karen's mother is the one who is accusing Lee. And then Barry kind of gets the captain to reveal that there is a case, right? That it's like one of those things where it's like, well, if you bring this to court and you don't have a case, you're going to look like a fool and you're going to embarrass everybody. But apparently, because they're willing to take it to court, that they believe the police officers and like the public, not the public defendant, but the whoever, that they believe they have a case. And it may not be the best case, but they have enough of a case where they can take them to trial and try to get this thing done to a point where if they don't get it done and they kind of mess it up, they can always like turn the ire of like the public on Karen's mom for like lying about the whole situation. So they feel pretty good about it. Before he heads home, he calls his wife and asks her to stay with Lee's wife and his kids. And then he talks about how Lee's wife is like a beautiful, fucking sexy model. And then his wife is like, He then reaches out to another autopsy doctor about what he knows about that Karen Randall case. And that the guy's like, well, you better come down and see because the whole thing's kind of locked down. And because her dad's like hype in the hospital. And then he also mentions that the autopsy, because it wasn't at a hospital, all autopsy cases like automatically go to like the state hospital. So he needs to go to the state hospital to kind of like get information and kind of be a part of that autopsy. So then we learn about the various hospital systems in the Boston area. There's like the state hospital. There's Brigham Women's. There's the men's. I think those are. Oh no, there's one more. Fuck, what's it called? That hospital. The hospital that Barry works at is the. Oh, God, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a different hospital, but those are like, there's like the three major hospitals and then the state hospitals. Anyway, the Randalls, which is Karen Randall's the girl who died. Her dad is like the head of surgery and he's like very tied into like the medical community, especially at the men's hospital. Anyway, so Barry's head over to the state hospital because as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this before, that, that Karen, because she didn't die at a hospital, that she goes to the state coroner's office to be dissected and kind of figure out, do the autopsy and whatnot. So she's not really in the jurisdiction of anybody, so she kind of ends up there. But the men's is sending a coroner to go observe the autopsy to kind of make sure everything's done correctly. So he heads down there to observe as well, since he's in coroner and all the coroners know each other in town. It's like no one thinks that's anything weird. He's just gonna stop by, see what's going on. And when he gets there, he sees that the state coroner guy, like one of them, is working on a prostitute that has like rat bites, which is like, I don't know, it just isn't there. Thought it would have more to do with stuff, but it really doesn't. As I finish the book, anyway. So Hendricks is the guy that shows up from the men's, and he's like, oh, is this a prostitute? And they're like, yeah, why? He's like, oh my goodness, good, my stars and garters. Anyway, at that point they bring Karen in for the autopsy, and this other guy like takes off, but then Weston comes in. Weston is he's like an old timey like coroner. He's been doing this for years. He's been at the state for like 30 years. He's a great autopsy guy and great coroner and yada yada, all that good stuff. He he's been teaching at med schools and doing all this stuff. So he's like very thorough. He's excellent. No one's gonna have a problem with this. And Weston is being extra particular because he knows for a fact J.D. Randall, who's Karen's dad, is gonna be like looking through his notes and stuff. So he wants to make sure everything's good. And then the one thing they're really noticing in this whole situation is that their chances for being pregnant are like extremely low. So like, why was there an autopsy if she didn't have like, if she wasn't pregnant, right? That's like the question. And then it makes Barry question even more why Lee, like the whole thing, like Lee is, he's like a professional abortionist, even though it's illegal. But like, clearly this abortion was not done by a professional, by someone who'd done it before. It's clearly done by just some like rando person, because of all the stuff they see going in there. Next up, Barry goes to see Murphy, who's a biochemist friend. This guy, I mean, a lot of these chapters just start and you get like this fun description. Like I'm trying to like not talk about too much of this stuff because a lot of it's just like irrelevant because it's like, oh yeah, Murphy, he's this guy with blind guy. He has like super thick rimmed glasses, but he's super great. And then all his like assistants are like super babes or something, right? Or like they're all these like nerds. And then it's like, okay, then the story is like the second half of each chapter. It's kind of funny. Anyway. So he's super into like steroid and hormone research, particularly with pregnant women and babies. And Barry wants to see if he can like examine some of the stuff he got from the autopsy to see if this woman was pregnant. Next, we get another explanation about an old professor friend. And they're talking about the medical chart for Karen, right? Because he didn't have access to this before. But this guy does have access and he's kind of like, YOLO, here you go. And then they talk about how, let's see. Let's see. I'm going to ignore that because it's not relevant to the story. Okay. So the story is that the woman came in, Karen came in with her mother. Her mother is the one who was like, she was being completely hysterical. They drugged her up a little bit to calm her down, gave her some benzos. And then she said that Karen told her that Lee was the one who gave the abortion. And then Barry and this professor guy, they talk about the innocence of Lee and whatnot. And then the other guy's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like, Dr. Randall's or J.D. Randall's daughter died, so someone's going to have to pay for this. And then they have like an interesting discussion about guilt and about the legal system, and like at some point it's like someone's going to have to like be guilty for this. And if Lee's an easy scapegoat because he's Chinese, right? Because there's like a racial component, but also because he is an abortionist and people like they know it, and it's not like he can like if he goes to court like it's going to come out that he did it, and so then it's an easy like slam dunk to get this guy like imprisoned and kind of get justice, quote unquote. And so Barry goes to track down J.D. Randall, right? But he's in surgery, and he kind of watches him for a little bit and thinks about the whole surgery process and what's going on in there. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to go check out something else. And so then he goes to find the intern who was there when Karen came into like the emergency room, and he's the one who gave her penicillin, which the penicillin, I guess Karen had like an allergic reaction to the penicillin, which is actually like what killed her, or led to like, it's like one of those things where it's like, well, she's allergic to penicillin, so you gave it to her, and so it's going to cause a major effect. But I mean, was she already going to be dead? Like, was there anything you could have done? But now it's kind of your fault. And then in their conversation, Barry finds out that there was like a skull x-ray done, like they call them like skull plates. And it's where they do like, there's like a whole bunch of x-rays and it's like for each section of the skull or whatever, because the skull's like a spherical thing. So you can like check out all this stuff. And then again, he calls back to the professor guy and asks for the chart. But this time he gets completely denied because someone's clearly gotten to him. On his way home from that adventure, Barry runs into Conway on the street. And Conway is the guy who was like freaking out at the very beginning of the book. And so he picks him up and he's like, hey, where are you going? And he's like, I got like a symposium or something over at Children's Hospital. And so he's like, let me give you a ride. So they talk about Randall, they talk about Lee. Randall is apparently a super asshole, and he's also a complete shit as a surgeon. And he's also an asshole. Like, that's funny. It's like, that motherfucker, I hate that guy. It's a piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. Also, his surgery skills, awful. He's terrible. His hands are too big. He's not precise. He's always losing patients. Because Conway's a surgeon, too, so he has, like, some insight. And then at the end, they're, like, sitting quietly. And then he's like, also, he's an asshole. It's like, yeah, I know, dude. You already told us that shit. So then Barry goes to track down, I can't remember his name. It's like young Randall, Joseph Randall. I don't remember. It's Karen's brother and JD's like son. So there's like there's Karen and the brother's like a med student over at, I want to say Harvard. And so we get some more information about the family, and that he talks about that on so Karen died on like Sunday, and then on Saturday he was hanging out with his stepmom. So the mom is not the real mom. I think this is the first time this becomes like obvious. because the real mom like died a few years back, and then JD got like remarried to the stepmom who's very young and pretty and obvious, you know, kind of I'm a badass. It's like a here's my trophy wife, everyone behold kind of situation. And that they were hanging out till like 10 o'clock or something, and that the brother, who doesn't hang out with his sister so much because she's been at like some private school out in the woods, it comes up later, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. And so it's the first time he'd seen her in like weeks, and he's like, man, she's definitely gained some weight. And then she had like hair growth on her lip and on her arms, and like dark hair growth, which can be a sign of pregnancy. It can also be a sign of like other things. And same thing with the hair, with the weight gain and stuff. But he's like, I don't know. And he's like, my uncle Peter Randall, who's a doctor everyone loves, and he's the complete opposite of JD, who's an asshole. He brought it up as well. But nothing else really important to know. And so Barry's like, cool, see ya. And as he's walking out, he bumps into JD, who's coming to see his son as well. At this point, JD starts like railing into Barry. At first, he tries to bribe him to shut the fuck up, and then he threatens him, and then Barry snaps back because you remember Barry was like a Marine in like World War II, and then also he was like a police officer, and then he went to like law school. He's done a lot of shit. It's like one of these kind of like, how old is this guy? And to be fair, I'm like in my early 40s, and I've done a lot of shit too. I was like a musician. I've done like the therapy thing. I've been in the army like twice, 2 different times. So, like, yeah, that's fair. Maybe he did all this shit, and he's just like a lunatic like I am. I get it. Anyway, and I was like a teacher for a while. Like, fuck. Anyway. So then Barry, he snaps back. They get really angry, and they, like, cuss each other out. And then Randall, like, throws one more threat his way and then drives off. So finally, Barry, at this point, is like, all right, time to get the fuck home. Jesus. And then when he gets there, he finds out from Mrs. Lee. So remember, he sent his mom over to, or no, his mom, sorry, MILF alert. No, he sent his wife over to take care of Miss Lee, the hot, I'm going to assume Asian chick. And then, so the kids are like causing craziness and all that good stuff. But he finds out that Lee's like normal lawyer that he works with, because you know, you're a doctor and you get sued all the time, so you might as well have a lawyer on retention. That he's like, no, I can't do the case. And so he calls up and he's like, hey man, I need to meet you. And the guy's like, I'm walking out the door. If you want to meet me at this bar, you can. And then they get there, and they have like a chit chat about the whole thing. They quibble about the law. They quibble about like guilt versus what the law is going to see. And then legally speaking, the lawyer is like, I honestly, I mean, I would do it, but I literally don't have time. But we're gonna get somebody in the law firm to like take care of it. Don't worry, like he'll have some representation because you know he pays us to fucking have representation. But at the same time, like if you talk to Lee, like he's lying about something, and that never comes up again. So, oh Jesus, I'm still sick, so I apologize. If you're listening to these videos at the end of June, when I recorded these, I was sick for like a week. So a lot of my videos around this time are gonna have me kind of out of it. Finally, he goes back home. He gets a call from his boss, which is the Simmons guy, who he's like, you know, him and Simmons and Lee are like in cahoots for like the abortion thing. And then obviously he's like, yeah, man, a lot of people have been asking about you and all this stuff, but like whatever, just come meet with me tomorrow. And Barry's like, yeah, sounds good. And then he mentions this funny case they worked on a while ago where there was like test results were very confusing, and that's because they were mislabeled. So they're like, I don't understand, these test results don't make any sense. And it's because they belong to a different patient. And then I think it's trying to hint at like, there's all this stuff that says one thing and it doesn't make sense, probably because you're looking at the wrong person, right? It's trying to imply that like Lee obviously didn't do this because nothing makes sense in this regard. So like if you want like the good results, you got to find somebody else. And so then, like I said, it's like part 2, but instead of being like part 2, we moved to Tuesday. All right, so everything that happened, it was on Monday. Right? He got a lot of work done. So this guy's taking like a whole week off work to just like take care of this shit and help his friend out. So at this juncture, Barry wakes up and he's like, time to go to Smith College. Oh, that's what it is, Smith College. Smith College is where Karen was going. So he drives out there. It's like a 2.5-hour drive. It's in the middle of fucking nowhere. And it's an all-girls school. So, of course, it's like insane. And all the locals like hate all the like horny women who are like hanging out, being crazy and probably lesing it out. But then he finds out from, let's see. Oh, yeah. So he tracks down her roommate in her room and they are chit-chatting. And the roommate is like, I don't really like her. She's kind of a bitch. She's always like fucking around, like literally fucking around. And she's like not going to class. And I know she bragged about having 2 abortions before college even started. She's always with boys, but there's 2 in particular. This football guy over at Harvard and this black guy who's like a musician downtown. And she claims she was on the pill. And he's like, really? And she's like, yeah, it's over there. And he goes and looks, and it's like obviously just like an aspirin. And he's like, that's not a fucking birth control pill. But he takes one in case anyway. Yeah, and then the roommate also shares that she hated her parents. And not her mom. She loved her mom. But like the stepmom and the dad, she hated them. And she did things, it seems like she did things specifically to like piss them off. And so then Barry gathers some information about the boys. Like I said, he takes the pill, and then he's about to leave, and the girl's like, I know you're not really a doctor. And he's like, excuse me? And she's like, you're a lawyer. And he's like, kind of, because he did go to law school. Anyway, so he's like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. So he leaves. He heads over to see the skull plates. There's nothing about them. Like, there's no information. There's no reason. It appears there's absolutely no reason for that to even happen. He then calls into a pharmacy about the pills to find out, like, he's like, oh yeah, I'm a doctor. He's using like he like switches. He's like, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, whatever you need, whatever it needs to be to get the information. So he calls the pharmacy and he's like, oh hey, I'm just trying to check on a prescription for like a patient of mine, Karen Randall. And they're like, oh yeah, aspirin. And he's like, okay, that's confirmed. Which he thought anyway, because he like tested it by tasting it. And I'm like, okay. Next up, he goes to the Randall mansion. And he kind of corners Miss Randall, who's there. And then she tells this big fucking lie of a story. And he like calls her out on it. And he knows it for several reasons. First of all, she talks about how much the abortion cost, and it was like way too much money for what Lee charges for an abortion. And the amount of blood loss and like the side of the car that the girl was on and all this stuff. Like nothing adds up. So it's just like reinforcing that there's some like shady bullshit going on. He then tracks down, because he doesn't know who these guys are necessarily, so he tracks down well, he knows a football player because that's easier to find, but the black guy, he doesn't know too much about him. So he tracks down like the people who took the picture of the guy that Karen had. They have a stamp on the back, so he tracks down their little store, and he finds out that this guy's a member of the Zephyrs, which they play down the street at this like club. So he's like, okay, I can go check that out later. And his name's like Roman. Then he goes and checks out the white kid who plays football at Harvard, right? He catches him right after practice, and he lives in Liver House. Hey, I love this shit. Like I said, if you follow me at all, I spent a decent amount of time in Boston. My family immigrated mostly to Boston from Sicily. Some went to Argentina, like my mom and stuff. But and then came up to the U.S. But so it's super funny. And then it's like Lever House. Man, I spent a lot of fucking time there with girls and stuff when I was out there. So like I have a deep appreciation for that. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. This guy's cracks me up. Anyway, let's see. See about another guy. Oh yeah. He doesn't want to get involved in this. He talks about how he was like really in love with Karen and they were like having a good thing, but then she was like super fucking crazy, and he's like, nah, I'm done. They broke up, and then they kind of got back together, and that she has so many fucking problems, and that she was a total slut, and that she loved drugs, and that he found out that she had an abortion right after they broke up the first time, and people were saying that she was saying that it was his, and he's like, I don't think so, but I don't know, whatever. And then let's see, at one point, then like later on they ran back into each other. She wanted to get back together, and he got back together like again. It seemed like a third time if I remember correctly. And then he was like, hell no, I'm done with this crazy bitch. And then he saw her on Saturday. Oh no, he saw her on Sunday, the day she died. And he then explains that he was getting ready for some fucking event, like doing his tie and thinking about stuff, and then she showed up and demanded to like talk to him, and he's like, fine, fuck. And then she's like, oh, something, I need an abortion. And he's like, I'm really not paying attention to you. You're fucking crazy. Like, I don't need you to manipulate me anymore. And she got mad and like stormed off. And he's like, where are you going? And she's like, I don't know. He's like, okay. So next up, Barry goes and hits up Peter Randall, who's the uncle of Karen and like the brother of JD Randall, right? He's a fat, gregarious guy that comes up like, oh, he's so friendly and he's so happy. And he walks in, he's like, hey, what's up, Barry? What's going on, man? Come on in. And Peter says that Barry has a good head on his shoulder. Oh, no. Barry says that Peter has a good head on his shoulders, unlike his brother. So they talk about it. They talk about Karen came in and like she was like freaking out and like I can't see and all this stuff, which is like, and he's literally like, oh yeah, she had hysteria, so I just gave her like some placebos. And then like he was like, a lot of times with women, they come in here because they're having some relationship problems or something, and so they think they get like neurotic, and so then you just give them something. You're like, okay, cool, let's do x-rays of your skull, and then after you do that, and you're like, hey, you want to come back for follow-up? And they're like, no, I feel fine, because they just needed someone to like give them attention because they're nuts, and Karen is like super nuts, even more so, right? Probably like a borderline personality disorder, to be completely honest. And then Barry mentions that, according to the autopsy, that she wasn't pregnant. And Peter's like, yeah, I didn't think she was either. So Barry gets home again, and when he rolls up to his house, the police captain's there with like his lights on, and it's like, the fuck are you doing here? And the captain's like, oh, I hear you getting into stuff maybe you shouldn't be getting into too. And then Barry's like, you better turn that fucking lights off and get out of here before I fucking sue you. He's like, he does the whole thing where he pulls out like his notebook and starts writing down like the thing, and he's like, I'm gonna go inside and call the police commissioner, the mayor, and like everything else. And the guy's, you better fucking not. And he's like, get off my fucking property, asshole. And and he uses some of his like law school magic that he learned about like what police can and can't do and stuff. And he's like, he's using like law school jujitsu on this guy. And the police captain's like, all right, fuck you, get out, I'm leaving. He's like, yeah, go fuck yourself. And then he gets inside. He's like, man, I'm tired. And his wife's like, don't forget, we have a gala to go to from one of your friends. I think his name's Murphy. And he's like, I don't want to go. And his wife's like, no, we got to go. And he's like, fine. So when he's there, he runs into Hammond. Hammond's like an up-and-coming doctor from San Francisco. And then Hammond like fills in. Barry's like, Brando's livid. He's running around. He's like screaming at people. He's under investigation. The hospital at the men's, or the pharmacy at the men's, is missing like a whole stack of methamphetamine, like a lot, like boxes full of it. And that this happened before, and that it's a huge deal. And Barry's like, wow, that's crazy. And this guy's like, yeah, I don't know anything to do with that. And then Barry's like, maybe it has to do something with Karen. And then Hammond's like, yeah, man, whatever it is, I'll keep you in the loop. And I literally don't think we ever hear from this guy again. I think maybe once he comes up. Anyway. So Morris is the buddy. Morris is like an old friend for Barry, and he's clearly throwing this gala because he got some promotion and he's trying to make more connections to get like more raises and more stuff going on. And as Barry looks around the room, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the only one here who's like actually hangs out with this guy, and they play like bridge on the weekends or something." And then as Barry's like going around just kind of chatting with people, some random doctor is like, you better be careful, JD's crazy. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then he talks to like a psychiatrist friend, and I love this guy. This guy's talking about all sorts of crazy stuff. He's like psychoanalyzing people while they're standing there. And then he mentions Bubbles. And it's like, who? And it's like, Karen. She lived with Bubbles and like someone else for like the summer last year when she apparently got like her last abortion, her last like known abortion. And so then he wanders over to Hammond because Bubbles apparently lives in like Bunker Hill, which is like where the state house is and stuff. And it's kind of like a interesting neighborhood. It's like there's a lot of college kids who stack up in there. Like I had buddies in there from my lacrosse team like 20 years ago or whatever that were they all lived on Bunker Hill together, like 6 of these guys in like a 2-bedroom apartment. And then but then there's like really fancy apartments because it's like right downtown Boston essentially. So you also got some like really nice pads there as well. And so Hammond lives there, right? And he's living in his like sweet ass bachelor pad. He's like, hey, do you know Bubbles? He's like, oh yeah, Bubbles. Everyone knows Bubbles. She's with some like Longface. Like, who the fuck's Longface? Like, he's a musician. And so Barry heads over to find this musician, and the guy's like totally strung out. And his roommate's like, man, you be careful, man. He has bad trips, man. He gets him to kind of come down a little bit with the help of the roommate, and then he tells Barry that Karen was terrible. Then he freaks out. He's calling him a cop. And the musician, they have to like calm him down again. And then at the very end, Barry, he like leans over and kisses Barry on the lips. And Barry's like, God damn it. Fucking musicians. And then Barry heads home. Let's see, does this happen now? Yeah. So Barry heads home, and he gets home, and his wife's like, you okay? And it's like, yeah, guy, I got kissed. And she like giggles, and he's like, no. And he's like, by a man. And she's like, ooh, did you like it? And Barry's like, the fuck's going on here? And then she gets super randy. She gets super randy, and is like, let's fuck. And so then they have the sex. And that takes us to Wednesday. On Wednesday, Barry gets a call. He calls about the autopsy, and now the autopsy says there's a pregnancy, which is odd because he clearly saw that there wasn't. So he heads over to Angela Hardy's place to find this Bubbles lady, but no one's home, or at least Angela's not home. And he's talking to this lady who's there, finds out that this is Bubbles. And then Bubbles tells him that Karen had an abortion last summer and that it was bad. Lots of like nightmares afterwards, like a bad trip, that she's been taking lots of meth and other such things. And they talk about where they got it, where she got it from. She doesn't want to talk about that, but then they got a lot of meth and all this stuff. And that Karen was shooting speed with like a needle, which nobody does. It's just kind of crazy. And then she mentions that she should really talk to Angela. And at that point, a girl busts in. And who's that girl? Of course, it's Angela. They start talking. Angela does not like Karen. She's a cunt, right? Karen stole a boy from Angela at some point, some doctor guy. And she's all pissed off because she's like, if it wasn't for Karen, I would have gone off with him and I'd be out in like Chicago or something. And also that Karen was fucking crazy. The last time any of them saw her was last year. But the football player guy that he just talked to said that he saw her on Sunday and that she was coming over here, that they had been like together or whatever. And that definitely there's some cover up going on here with this. So then he calls his buddy who did the blood sample, and the guy says definitively there was no pregnancy. And then he contacts Lee's lawyer again and finds out that a guy, I think it's Wilson, was one of the members of the law firm, was put on Lee's case, and then he's getting into it right now. he goes back to meet with Weston, the state hospital coroner, so they have like an argument about the diagnosis, because at the time when they were doing the autopsy, they both agreed that there was no pregnancy, but now like there's doubt, and the guy is like, well, if there's any doubt, I'm not gonna like co-sign to it or whatever. And then Barry kind of calls him out for being like caught up in like the schemes of other men, if you will, not wanting to take a risk, and they go back and forth with that. Finally, Barry goes to meet with Sanderson. Sanderson again is his boss. He's one of the guys who helped cover up like the abortions that Lee was doing and whatnot. And he mentions to Barry that his wife overheard something at like a party, that Peter Randall does abortions, and he very quietly has a very select clientele, but that he's been doing them for a long time. Barry thinks that like he's like, well, it's kind of like the same case with Lee. It's like there's no way what he saw in the autopsy would indicate that somebody like Peter Randall, who's been doing this for a long time and who's like a very good doctor, would not have like some sort of test, some sort of documentation, something like he wouldn't be so sloppy. Like the whole uterus was like fucking jacked up, right? So again, it's like the reason why Lee did not do the abortion is the same reason why Peter didn't do the abortion. Barry then goes meets with another doctor. They talk about JD, how JD had mistresses when he was married to Karen's mom, and that Karen found out, and that this is part of the reason she hated him, and that the whole thing with his marriage with his new wife is that this new wife is just like a trophy wife. It's just an ornament, right? That he's not really that into her. He just likes having like this hot young wife around. They talk about how Peter Randall definitely did abortions for Karen in the past, and that most likely the most recent abortion attempt was from him. They talk about like men and women and like the differences and how they like react to things and do things and whatnot. And this guy's not the psychiatrist, but he's doing a lot of like psychiatry mumbo jumbo to him. It's like, because Barry's like, whatever, I'm not like JD Randall, and then he's like, oh yeah, what about that nurse you hang out with at lunch a couple times a week, that pretty young nurse that's 10 years younger than you? And Barry's like, we're just friends. And he's like, oh, you're just friends who happen to just like stumble into lunch at the same time on every Thursday and whatever, and I bet you love the attention from or not. And then Barry gets like very uncomfortable with the whole situation. Oh goodness. The last thing we find out is that JD wanted this guy, I can't remember his name, I didn't put it in my notes, to see Karen. But he was like, hell no, that bitch is crazy. At this point, Barry goes to meet with the lawyer at this like old boxer's gym. And this lawyer is a young, very educated, like black guy. And so this guy's like a lot to prove, because he goes to the 1960s, he's black, and he's a young member of this firm. And so he's got something to prove. So he's like, he definitely wants this case to go to trial so that he can show everyone that Lee is innocent, and that he can make like, it's part of like his reputation. Barry definitely doesn't want this to go to trial, because he definitely doesn't want Lee's name to get dragged anymore, because it's destroying his reputation, and as a doctor in like Boston, like your reputation, it means so much. But the guy's like, this Wilson guy is like, nah, hell no, we're definitely going to do this. We're going to destroy the reputation of Karen. We're going to destroy the reputation of her mother-in-law. And that's how we win this case. And Barry and him go back and forth about that. And the lawyer says, all that matters is that we win. And Barry's like, no, there has to be another way. And then Wilson is like, hey, if you can find the actual abortionist, we won't have to go to trial. But otherwise, this fucking thing's on this train is going to trial. Barry gets a call from his wife, or he calls to check on his wife, and like the Lee's house has gotten like assaulted. People broke a bunch of windows. They set a burning cross on the ground, and like the police did absolutely nothing. So Barry, he's freaking out, or he's not even freaking out. He just realizes that he's being very angry, and he's doing things based on emotion rather than logic. So he calls the Globe and tells them like, hey, there was this thing, you should probably check it out. He heads over there, and then he starts talking to the police, to Peterson, the police captain, about how incompetent they are, about all this stuff they're doing. And around this time, the Globe guy shows up, and so he starts telling the Globe guy like what happened and how the police weren't there and all this stuff. The Globe guy's like writing down, and the captain of the police is like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm doing my fucking job, bro. He finds a bunch of letters, people threatening the Lees, all that stuff, and he finds a letter from like a lady who got an abortion from Lee, saying like changed her life and it was the best thing ever, and yada yada. And he like silently takes that note to go destroy later, so it doesn't implicate Lee any more than it already has. At that juncture, he hooks up with Wilson again, and they're going to head over to Randall's place to kind of like see what's going on, or to confront them or talk to them about like not going to trial and dropping the charges and whatnot. But on their way there, or when they get there, Barry like realizes something's amiss. So there was this. So Peter Randall has like a Mercedes-Benz, like a silver Mercedes-Benz that was supposedly got stolen after Karen had borrowed it, but it's sitting in their driveway right now. So he's like, hold up, wait a minute, let's back up a little bit and check it out. So they hide and watch Peter and JD come out. They take the Mercedes and JD's car and they drive off. So then Wilson and Barry like follow them on like not like a high-speed chase, but very sneakily follow them to like this ridge area. And they see, and then Wilson pulls out. He's like, check this out, and he's got a camera. So he starts taking pictures of Peter and JD as they're like setting the car on fire and like pushing it over a cliff and stuff to destroy the car. And so at this point, Wilson's like, but like cha-ching, we have perfect evidence that like they're covering this up, and we're definitely gonna get Lee off. So he takes a whole bunch, but then Barry's like, no, I want to still confront them and get this thing out. And Wilson's like, why? They're going to lose this trial. He's like, I don't want it to go to trial, motherfucker, blah, 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 blah. And they talk about, like, because the lawyer also heard about a bunch of stuff about Peter doing, like, abortion stuff. And, like, it's probably him. And he's been Karen's doctor in the past and all this stuff. And he's like, no, I don't believe Peter did it either. And he's like, doesn't matter what he did. It's like, we're going to get this guy. I'm going to win this case. And so they head over there, and then Wilson, while they're talking to the Randalls, they like call him out. They taunt him a little bit. And then Wilson, like, kind of, like, doesn't do anything. He just pisses JD off, so there's no way he's going to not want to go to trial at this point because he's going to get mad. And then Barry gets mad at him because he absolutely does, and again, it's like the argument happens that like Wilson wants to go to trial for his reputation to do this, and then Barry doesn't want to go to trial because of Lee's reputation and all this stuff. They argue about Peter. It's like whether or not he's also an abortionist, and whether or not he did it or not. Like they have some evidence that they're covering stuff up and that he did do something. At that point, Barry drops Wilson off. And then he heads home, and he's thinking about everything that's going on. He's like, something doesn't make sense about Peter. He knew Karen. He would have done tests on her, but the whole thing with her complaint with her eyes stuff, there's like all these other medical things that could have been done. There's no way he would just do an abortion without checking something else out first. There's no evidence of pregnancy even, so just nothing makes sense. And then he wouldn't have sent him to Lee thinking that Lee was going to do an abortion either, because Lee definitely would have not, because he was a professional that came to all these things. And then also he thinks about how the stepmother got the stepmother got an abortion from Lee, and that's how she knew that Lee was an abortionist, even though Karen wouldn't have known. So there's no way she would have done it because, well, I think she might have known too, because if Peter sent her over. Anyway, so then we're on part 4, which is Thursday. So Thursday begins. Sorry, a little sick. So Barry reviews his capabilities, like what he's able to do in regards to the incident, what he can and can't do. He talks to his wife about Peter's innocence, about if Peter do it or not, and they kind of go back and forth on that. And his wife's like, well, at some point she's like, you haven't been dealing with like Miss Lee and like this whole craziness. You weren't there when like the cross was burning and stuff. Like, Lee is innocent. This needs to happen. Like, Peter probably did it. And then at that point, Peter calls Barry to go over to his place. So Barry heads over. And then Peter's sitting there and he's like, hey, have a seat. And he's super nice and friendly. And he's like, so Evelyn, come in here. And it's like, who the fuck's Evelyn? Evelyn is the mother-in-law. Not the mother-in-law, the stepmother. I just haven't said anything about it up to this point. So Evelyn and Peter have been having an affair. So JD's wife, who's like a trophy wife, isn't getting like what she needs because JD is not interested. He just wants to work, and like that's how he gets his rocks off, and probably has mistresses on the side anyway. So he married Evelyn to like as a show of force, but then Evelyn's unhappy with him, and so her and Peter have been hooking up this whole time. And JD, like, they talk about like, does he know? And it's like, well, he knows she's probably fucking around with somebody, but is it fucking around with me? Like, I don't want that to come out. I don't want to go to trial because then this shit's gonna come out and it's gonna be crazy. And then she admits that, yeah, Lee did give her an abortion a couple of years ago and whatnot, and that Lee... And then they both say, like, Lee definitely did not do Karen's abortion. And then it's like, why the fuck did you tell the police that? And she's like, I don't know, I was freaking out, and I didn't know what to do, and I just was, like, throwing names out, and I thought maybe it was Peter, and I didn't want to get him in trouble, and been like... But Peter's like, I didn't do it either, because you know me. Like, I would have done tests, there's no fucking way. Like, and he explains that, like, this is actually... Karen's 4th abortion. Like, he did the previous 3, but at some point he was like, this girl needs to like fucking live with her results. And like, they talk a little bit about her relationship with her dad and like all that craziness. And at some point Peter's like, in like, not right now in the thing, but he's talking about like, at some point I was like, hey, if she wants to be pregnant, she can fucking have those kids, and then she can have that whole thing with her dad and like deal with that, because like, I'm done with this shit, right? And so that's why he was like, hey, I'm not going to do it, but if you want to check, Dr. Lee does it too. And then he went to Dr. Lee, and Dr. Lee was like, hell's no, you're 4 months pregnant, according to you, I'm not doing it. And Peter knew that. He's like, I'm gonna send her to Lee. But again, it's like Peter's whole thing where it's like, hysteria, women, you gotta just give him something. So he knew sending him to Lee would do nothing, because Karen's completely out of her fucking mind. And then Evelyn explains that like Karen didn't say anything about Lee. She kept talking about like a needle, about something needle, like do it with the needle, blah 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 blah. Right. And then we get like this funny conversation. Barry's like, "Oh, my son's very observant, my like 7-year-old or whatever he is." And so he, at some point, I'm sitting at home and he's like, "Dad, what's an abortionist?" It's just like a little cute scene with like kids asking questions. And this whole scene is like completely unnecessary for the story, but it's like a cute little thing. It just kind of expands. I like stuff like this sometimes because it like expands the universe, if you will, even if the universe is just like this family setting. Because then there's like they're having dinner, and then the dad's not hungry, and so the son's like, "Well, I don't want to eat either." And then the daughter's like, "I'm not eating." And then the mom's like, gives him like a look, and he's like, "Okay, I'm eating. Look, I'm loving it." And then the son's like, tries it. He's like, "Oh, this is good." And then the daughter's like, "I want to try." And then she does something where she's like, "Oh, I hate it. I'm so bad. I hate all of you," and runs off. And she's like 3 or 4 or something, right? So it's kind of funny. Anyway, at that point, Barry heads over to the Zephyr Club to meet up with Roman. Roman's the black guy from the picture who's like the musician or whatever. So he listens to play some rock and roll, and then he pretends that he's trying to get drugs from him, and the guy keeps being like, "Are you a copper? You got to show me. You can't trap me, blah, 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 blah." And then at some point he mentions Karen, and the Roman like freaks out. He's like, "You see my homies over here? They're going to kick your ass. Like, if you don't get the fuck out of here right now." And so Barry does like this very sneaky thing. He like takes his glasses off, sets them on the table, and is like, "All right, fine." And he gets up to leave, and then he's like, "Oh, I forgot my glasses." So then he comes back, and when he's back, he sees Roman making a payphone call, and he's like, "Got him." So at that point, Barry goes and he calls his friend Hammond from like another payphone, and he's like, "Hey, can you get the records of Roman for me?" And then at that point, he's like some diner eating like a hot dog, and there's like a whole weird conversation about like eating hot dogs and hamburgers and like meat and shit. It's kind of weird. But then he sees Roman walking. He's like, "All right, cool." So he follows him, and he's super sneaky, and then he loses Roman, and then he gets like fucking jacked up, like beat in the back of the head. And he's like stumbling around afterwards. He kind of like wakes up and he's all cut up and bleeding and injured. And he like stumbles out into like a cab, and the guy's like, "Get the fuck out of my cab." And then he like goes a little bit more, and he kind of he like passes out halfway in the street. And then he wakes up and he's like in the hospital because some other cabbie saw him on the street and thought he was just a drunk homeless guy and was like, "Oh shit, this guy's beat up." And so he dragged him off and took him to the men's, which is where Hammond is, who we just talked to. And he's there, and he's getting stitched up and everything. And he's like, "I need to see Hammond. Let me see Hammond." And like the intern, it's like not even an intern, he's like a medical student. And he's like, "Go get fucking Hammond right now." And they're like, and you are not admitting me. Do not put this in a fucking medical record. He's very insistent about this whole thing. And he's like, "Okay." Then Hammond like rolls in once he hears who it is. He's like, "Holy fuck, man, what's going on?" And he's like, "Hey, your med student did a very good job." And he's like, "Thank you." And it's like, "Hey, there's going to be 2 other people on their way." And these 2 other people are Roman and Angela. And so there's like a whole thing with that and a conversation. And then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh no, we got 2 more people coming to the emergency room over here." And the first one is Roman, and he's dead. And the second one is Angela, and she's dying. Like, she's lost a lot of blood. She's like coming in and out of consciousness. So they're able to save her. And then at some point they get Barry kind of like so he can walk around again, even though he's like still got a headache and all this stuff. And then Peterson shows up, the police captain, and he's like, "Holy shit, we found this guy. He like jumped out a window, and this girl tried to like kill herself and all this stuff. It's nuts." He's like, "Wait a second, what are you doing here?" And Barry's like, "Shut the fuck up and get out of here." He's like, "I want to talk to you about what happened." And then Barry's like, "Hell's no." And we find out, and then Barry like he's like, "I was a police officer 8 years ago." It's just like, I don't know why. Anyway, so then he takes he gets some blood from Roman, and he takes it down to like the basement where they have mice, and he does like the mouse test, which is the mouse test is where it's like if you can give like morphine to like a mouse, or blood with morphine in it, and you inject it into a mouse, it'll like do something certain, so that way you can prove that he has morphine in it. So they prove to him that like Roman had morphine, which I guess is important because it's like, I don't know, it's part of like the stolen morphine, which is like Angela was stealing it from the hospital, right? We find out more about that. So it's like it's like at this point we're like at the end of the book, so we're like solving mystery after mystery. So where's that missing morphine? Angela was taking it for her and Karen and Bubbles and like whoever else to use, and that kind of pull, and then selling it through Roman to make some extra money, and then that's how Roman kind of got dragged in, and then maybe he had sex with Karen. I don't know, that never was like really confirmed, but he's around. And then then they go back up to speak to Angela. She had to get like 3 quarts of blood or something, or 3 pints of blood. So she's like partially recovered, but she's still kind of out of it. And then Barry and Hammond Barry's like, "I'm going to give her this thing, this Nalfrez or whatever, but if you give it to somebody and they're on like morphine," which she is, right? So he found out that Roman and her were like using morphine, and then if she's on it, then they give it to her, she's going to have like these severe effects, and it could possibly kill her. or something, right? It's kind of hard to follow, to be completely honest. Anyway, so then he's like, I'm going to inject this with you to see if you're on morphine or to see something. And Angela, she's a nurse and she knows the reaction. She's like, you can't do that, I'll die. And he's like, we'll see about that. I'm just going to give you like 2 milligrams of this thing. And then Hammond's like, I really don't feel comfortable with this whole situation. And Barry's like, shut the fuck up, Hammond. And so he goes to like get the thing to get the injection, and instead he just puts water in it and he injects her with water. He's like, all right, the symptoms should show up anytime soon. And then she confesses at this point to being the one who stole the morphine and all this stuff, and also that she is the one who did the abortion for Karen, like she admits it, and that Roman helped, and that's how they're all tied together. And that's why Roman was trying to go kill Angela at this juncture this evening after Barry like kind of drove him to it. And they got to like a fight, and that's how they like ended up here. And it's like, oh, Karen just tried to kill herself, but it's like, no, not actually. She just got into like a knife fight with this crazy guy. And then he gives her more water and says, hey, this is morphine, this should ease your symptoms. And again, it's all placebo. And Hammond and Barry like hand out. They go talk to Angela's parents about the drugs and about some other legal stuff she's going to get into. And her parents are like, yeah, sigh. We kind of figured something like this was going on. We also know that Angela is really close to her uncle at some point in this book, which becomes important right here near the end. I forgot to mention that earlier. But that's why she kind of went into medicine and such. Yeah, but all right, so then Hammond and Barry are hanging out in the doctor's room, and then Hammond's like, did you really have to like fuck around with that girl and do all this stuff? And he's like, yes. And then Barry's like, hold up, I'm unconscious. He's got some sort of like crazy delirium, and he's getting like the mocha, which is like a test you give like people who are going into delirium. Essentially, Hammond gives it to him. Like, what day is it? Where are you at? Like shit like that. And Barry's like, what are you talking about? I know exactly where I'm at. And then he kind of like checks in and out, and it's like passing in and out, and then as we get like shots of him like kind of being awake, and they're like drilling holes in his head to get like the blood pressure out of his skull and stuff like that, and then he like passes out for good. And then the last section, or it's like the second to last section, I guess, is like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so he's been out for a little bit, and then like he kind of like wakes up and can get visitors at some point. And so Lee shows up, and he's like, hey man, thanks for all your help. And Barry's like, yeah, man, we can start working again together. And he's like, nah, bitch, I'm going to California. I got to get out of this place. Like, my reputation is ruined. And Barry apologizes for calling the Globe. He's like, no, man, you did the right thing. You took care of my family. I appreciate it. But I got to go. And then his wife comes up, and he got like 3 holes in his head to get this stuff out. But he's doing all right. And then, like, they get, it's like, okay, everything's kind of being settled. Like, the case is being dropped. Peter's okay. Lee's okay. Everything's going to kind of go back to normal. But Barry's not like satisfied yet, because he feels like there's more, and he needs to figure out like what the other issues are. So he goes to check out Angela's apartment, and there he finds some like pretty sus things. Like, there's like a chair that has like no fingerprints on it, and there's some other stuff there, and he's just there pretending to be like another one of the like forensic guys here to show up and kind of take a look at stuff. And then we get like postscript is what he calls it, but it's like just the epilogue. So then on Monday, right, so it's been a week of this book, he goes to see Weston. Weston is the coroner, original, all the way back, the old man who like hid the pregnancy, or said she was pregnant and all this other crazy stuff. And then we find out, like, Barry calls him out, and he's like, yes, I was helping Angela with like a lot of stuff, right? So it doesn't say directly, but I think this is the uncle that we kind of got hinted at before. And at some point he was just going to visit Angela or maybe he was fucking her, I don't know. Anyway, so he goes to visit Angela, and he comes into the room, and Roman's chasing her around with like a razor blade, and she's like got like a steak knife, and they're like fighting. They're like knife fighting. And so Weston like does something with like the chair to like interrupt him, and then Angela's able to like get him like a nice stab, and then Roman's like, oh, like stumbling around, and then Angela goes and I guess like pushes him out the window, and that's how that all happened. And then she kind of passes out, and then Weston like noped the fuck out of there and probably called the police. And at some point we also find that Roman is the one who attacked Barry and cut him up with a razor, right? Because they were like, oh, it looks like someone got you with like a scalpel, and it kind of was hinting that like maybe it was like JD or some other medical guy, but it was just anyway. And then it's like and then they talk about, and then Barry like makes a passing remark right at the end. He's like, well, you can always say it was self-defense, and the guy's like, yeah, I can. And Barry heads out, and then he like sees an ambulance, and like it's the end of the book. So yeah, that's what was it? A case of need. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. I thought like at the end it's like, oh, okay, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't feel like I got anything out of this. But I enjoyed listening to it, and it was like interesting, and all the doctor bullshit was kind of interesting, and like the relationship of characters. And I feel like this is like a Michael Creighton thing, where it's like sometimes the story doesn't really like go anywhere, if you will. It's just kind of like stuff happens, but it's like the characters are interesting, and the writing he's very good at writing. So it's like I'm following along, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm digging this, and he really kind of like nails like the time that this is supposed to take place, like the kind of like attitude of people and how they're interacting with each other, and just like some thoughts. So it's good. I definitely recommend it. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later.